Aesthetic Relativism and Female Psychology. Freud Institute. It is obvious that some composers are better than others and that some musical works are better than others. It is obvious that there is an enormous amount of intelligence in a high-grade musical work, such as Bach Fugue or Mozart Piano Concerto. And yet nothing is more common, even from musical people, than to profess to accept aesthetic relativism in connection with music. Part of this, a precipitating or triggering cause of it, is obviously that, because there is no obvious sense in which any musical work corresponds to some objective reality more closely than does any other musical work, there is therefore no obvious sense in which one musical work can be objectively better than any other work. In other words, the concept of objectivity has clear meaning only in connection with the concept of truth, and it is not obvious how to understand the concept of aesthetic merit in terms of the concept of truth. Be all of this as it may, it is patently disingenuous, and, ultimately, counter-empirical, as in, contrary to the very data of experience, not to mention all of the personal and social practices that arise out of experience, that, indeed, some musical works are better than others. And given how deeply obvious, how obvious at a visceral, sub-intellectual level, it is that some musical works are better than others, it seems that the philosophical difficulties involved in understanding the concept of artistic beauty in terms of the concept of truth cannot be entirely responsible for the intense popularity of aesthetic relativism. And while aesthetic relativism obviously has immense support in cultural Marxism and other nihilistically and relativistically inclined social movements, that does not explain why the concept of aesthetic beauty was such an easy target for these relativisms and nihilisms. Then just a moment ago, it occurred to me exactly why, despite being at odds with such deeply rooted experiential data, aesthetic relativism is so popular. Women are intensely concerned with their physical beauty. Nothing is more important to them than their aesthetic properties. There is no woman to whom it is not mortally wounding to be sincerely described as ugly or to whom it is not equally flattering to be sincerely described as beautiful. At the same time, it is inherent in what femininity is that women cannot openly admit that they are so sensitive to characterizations of their appearance. It is inherent in what psychological womanhood was that a woman's concern with her appearance is to be lived but not spoken, that this dependence is to be an open secret. Obvious and thus open. But never directly acknowledged, and thus a secret. And men, even boorish and brutal men, are aware of, and also respectful of, a woman's need to be cherished for her physical beauty while also having to be silent, or at least extremely oblique, about this need of hers. And if a man says, in a direct and unequivocal manner, that some musical works quote-unquote, are objectively beautiful, whereas others are objectively ugly, that some musical works are objectively better than others, this immediately registers to a woman as his saying that some women are just objectively more beautiful than others. And he knows that it so registers. So if a given person says this, he is violating the tacit agreement that people have not to openly discuss the just mentioned open secret, and if a given person agrees with it, that person too is violating that agreement. And that is the real psychological basis of the intense and yet obviously hypocritical fervor with which people espouse aesthetic relativism. And there is independent proof of this. The same person who claims to be a relativist about musical beauty, who claims that all musical works are equally valid and beautiful, adores certain musical works while detesting others. And the same person who claims to be a relativist about personal beauty, who claims that all people are beautiful, if only on the inside, finds certain people intensely attractive and finds others equally intensely repellent. And the same person who is guilty of the one hypocrisy is almost always guilty of the other. So we are dealing with two hypocrisies, two open secrets, each of which has a social justification while lacking an alethic or logical justification, that parallel each other. And that is because the one hypocrisy is really just a proxy for the other, relativism about musical beauty, which is just an absurd purely philosophical position, is really just a proxy for relativism about female beauty, which is not an absurd philosophical position, but a deeply important social protocol that is rooted in the depths of female psychology. and the intense popularity of the otherwise obviously contraindicated doctrine of musical relativism is surely to be explained in terms of the fact denials of musical relativism register psychologically as violations of the previously mentioned tacit agreement relating to the previously mentioned open secret. Please visit us at www.octandphilosophy.com and also at www.philosophipedia.com.